This is Jesse Hensley.
And this is Josh Turner.
Welcome to Turn Down for What?
All right. Turn down for what? Once again, we are here in the beautiful mountains of East Tennessee, getting ready for fall, feeling temperatures finally broke outside. So
it's going to warm up again this week. But
yeah, it's going to warm up again, but I have my
I think
flannels,
most of the United States is really hot right now, but where we're landing, it's actually quite nice.
Yeah. So well, it could be better, could be worse. And, some places they give extra incentives, some they don't. So that's going to be our first topic today as we roll into our news. Let's talk about Colorado giving you $6,000 if you want to buy a brand new EV. If you're trading in, I guess, a gas guzzler or gas anything, you get $6,000. And if you are going for a used, gives you $4,000. But that also goes towards a PHEV. Do you know what a PHEV?
A plug-in hybrid.
Oh, there you go. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about how, who was it? Ford made an announcement that they're also going to be looking at the plug-in hybrid. And I think there's a couple companies already that have that plug-in, get 50, 60-mile range. That way you can use it around town. You're not really sucking a lot of energy off the grid. And then when you need to go on a trip, you have it. Obviously, you've got, 3 different types of systems in a vehicle that way. Hopefully, they can get that down to 2. And if they can do that, keep the cost down, that's probably pretty good. But if you live in that area, that added to the $7,500.
But you're getting $13,000 off of it.
$13,000.
Yeah.
Now, that's not bad at all.
I mean, on a $50,000 vehicle, that's
what's the lowest? I think that lowest cost right now is the Kia. That little Kia.
Yeah. I think that the cheapest,
so.
the cheapest EVs that you'll find are 35 to 40 in that
so
range.
let's just say you got 40. That puts it down to like
27,
28,000. And that would be a 200-mile or 220-mile range.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to be going back and forth without a lot of headache that way. But
some
still,
of the base Teslas are like 45 to 50 in that range.
I can remember when they came out, it was 35 back in my day.
Yeah,
so
back in the day.
Back in the day. So that's actually, for Coloradians, is that the correct way of saying it?
Coloradians.
That'll be corrected soon. That's good. I mean, it's their money. They can do how they want to. They're trying to push that industry in their area. Still, you got to have the charging networks. I think that's the key to it.
Yeah,
we spoke to some. Not going to go there until you can charge.
Yeah, and we spoke to some Colorado Department of Transportation people a few weeks ago, and it seemed. I mean, obviously they're doing all the same federal funding stuff that's going on, but it seems like a lot of their network around the cities is already pretty well developed. It's just some of the rural areas that they're going to be working on, but that funding, like every other state's coming out soon. So in a year's time, 2 years' time, you'll see good infrastructure for that to encourage the adoption further beyond what they have. So
Yep. So there you go. That's the first part of our news. Now we're going to kind of roll into Ford again. Ford announced a few days ago that they are now going to say goodbye to the gas-powered variants of the Escape, Edge, and Transit Connect. Now this is on top of the Fiesta, which was announced a few weeks ago, maybe a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, if you've noticed, I think that Ford as a whole has realized that their niche is the trucks and the full-size SUVs, and you've seen them cut pretty much a lot of their smaller-size vehicles out.
I think everybody is doing that. I mean, that's kind of the thing. Would you rather have, for the same money, if you're not looking at much difference, a larger four-door vehicle that you could fit a family in, or the smaller vehicles? And that market is getting very cramped. And if you can kind of either electrify that or move some of those car company or some of those brands out of the way, and put them into like kind of like the Lamborghini we spoke about last week. It is a kind of a different Lamborghini. It's not the sports car. It's not their big SUV that they got, or smaller SUV that they have. So it's kind of that niche of a hybrid of different use. And what does that do to the rest of your offerings? So this is an announcement Ford has made to discontinue the gas versions and kind of bet, I guess, put more of a bet into those being EVs. I wonder if the same battery plant that's making the Ford in Tennessee is the same batteries that'll be used for that one. I think they have a battery plant that's also being looked at in Detroit. So,
and I mean, if we were talking about with Christopher a couple weeks ago, I think Ford with the announcements that they have with the T3, it's probably not just a truck. And he was suggesting that it could be, a species of vehicles.
Well, and they've done that recently.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the Bronco, they've taken that name Bronco and put it into its own car company, kind of.
Yeah.
Mustang, you have that one Mustang that, I don't really warm up to from a standpoint of what a Mustang is, but it's now a brand with under Ford. You have the regular Mustang, and now you have the EV Mustang. That's kind of a different between the two of them. And we won't even get into the very new Mustang, that $300,000 monster that they created that is beautiful. But has nothing to do with EVs, so we can't talk about it here. But Ford also announced a couple days ago that they are rebuilding and offering new Pro Charger 2. So me and you both have the Pro Charger. We spoke about before, I had a little issue with mine, and Ford was great at taking care of it, above and beyond to make sure that I was taken care of with that. So this is going to be an improvement to that. So they're going to have a detached cable with this one. So good for that. So if you break the cable, you don't have to unbolt everything. And these Pro Chargers, they are a direct wire into your system. So mine is on a 100 amp breaker. You have to basically wire that together. You got a couple $100 there of a good electrician to come in and do the work to mount it. So if there is ever a problem, say you do run over the cord or something, you can't do anything but replace the whole unit. So it sounds like that they've got a design that would allow that to be repaired. Different options with cellular and Wi-Fi for updates, and Ethernet finally. So now you can plug it in instead of having to work with the Ethernet system that they had on it, which for me was a little difficult in the location that I put it, but I can always run an Ethernet cord.
My one big beef about the Ford experience as a whole has been the app, the interactivity of the app and the charger.
Yeah.
I haven't had any issues with the charger as far as just plug and play. But one of the features that they talk about is, the interactivity of the app and studying, what was delivered, the energy savings over time. But the app will never connect to the internet, or the charger will never connect to the internet, because I don't even have that far away from my router. But it seems like in the forums that we're a part of for Lightnings, a lot of people have had issues with the chargers, especially with the connectivity of the internet. I think that it's great for delivering power as an infrastructure piece, but I think it's a huge improvement to add in
and you got to remember, who has done, other than Tesla, who has developed a brand new system like this, and then having to use old architecture to create that app interface, and then not have it in-house for multiple years to develop it. So this, again, it's just like our trucks. It's the first one, and, way before all these other car companies, except for Tesla, who's always been on a pedestal for us of, they did it first. But I would say that their first charging station wasn't the best. I don't know for sure. I didn't have one. But you always have that experience makes things better in that sense. So I think, again, this is kind of like their second version of their truck, the T3 that they're coming out with. What's that going to be in comparison to ours? I said it's going to be night and day.
Yeah. Touchscreen and otherwise, that's going to be huge. I just think that, I had an issue with mine where I connected it and wired it all properly, but if I run it at full power, it overheats. And I slightly reduced the amperage on it, and I can manually do that through the app. I was able to get it connected long enough to get that manually reduced. And so instead of, is it 20 amps? I think the max is 20.
It's higher than that. I think it's an 80 amp charger, but I don't know if it charges at 80 amps. That's the max. But
I reduced it, whatever the metric was, I reduced it by about 15%, 20%.
Okay.
And I'm still getting all the charge that I need.
It's still under 8 hours.
Way quicker than the base, what's the regular charger called? The mobile charger. It's way quicker than that. And it's more than enough.
You used your mobile charger for many, many months after you got it.
I did. I didn't really need the fast charger until I was doing the road trips. And then when we started hitting the road, like last week, we came back from Nashville at midnight. It was like almost 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And I was at 5% charge. Well, the next morning at 9 a.m., was like 8:30 a.m. I had to be out of the house doing work all day and driving all day, and so I had to have some charge. Well, I woke up the next morning to 90%, which is where I usually take the charge to.
Best you can hope for.
And that was 1 a.m. to basically 8 a.m. I had everything that I needed.
Yep.
And so with even the reduction in the power that I have delivered, the station shows a little yellow marker on the right side showing that it's reduced power delivered, but that was a manual choice, and I haven't had any eating problems since. Before that, it would basically charge, and then it would fault, but then automatically reset itself and charge at a high speed and then fault because it just kept overheating. Okay. And so, yeah, with the charger, it was just overheating consistently. And so with the ability to upgrade the systems, hopefully they'll develop better infrastructure on the inside to not allow it to overheat. The Ethernet connection would obviously solve the internet connectivity, but maybe improve the Wi-Fi abilities because, even when my charger's probably 25 feet from my actual router inside the garage door, but it still has connectivity problems. And if I open the door and hold it just right, I can get the connectivity, but it seems like the wireless chip on the inside isn't great for that connectivity and reporting.
And you can see the investment because, when Ford announced just a couple weeks ago, we even talked about it last week, that they created the Ford Integrated Services and then hired Peter Stern to oversee that development. That's exactly what we're talking about, and that's a big investment. So that's an investment Ford's making. I've not seen similar for other car makers. Obviously, Tesla's in their own world that has those type of people, and obviously now with owning X, they're going to be able to utilize those software teams that oversee that platform to also integrate some of that into to their system. But for Ford, again, it's that investment, and this charger here is their next evolution of that process, and it's very similar. So you got the 3-year warranty. They've got better temperatures. They got better heights. Operate at altitude. So that's another part too. When I started reading that, I was like,
it's minor feedback. I critique it just because I'm using it and I had issues, and I've seen a lot of other people have issues. You actually had a full station failure, which I haven't seen. I mean, that's happened some, but I think just in general, that's a technology for Ford that can be improved on.
And they have, obviously, with this new charger. So that's a good thing. Yeah. Also, they revealed a 180 kilowatt and a 240 kilowatt DC fast charger. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of that, but we did show a picture a moment ago of the new Ford charger. So that's what you can expect now for Ford users. And I guess you can use it for other CCS vehicles. I've not asked anybody if you could use that charger on a non-Ford vehicle.
Are they Buy America compliant?
I don't know. I don't think it has to do with it. It doesn't matter for those. Yeah. So I mean, they're only putting those at their dealerships right now. But you never know. You might go down the road sometime, and maybe somebody has done a test model and had a few Ford Chargers that they've allowed to come out as a test model.
If my Ford station had a 240 kW charger, I'd be pretty happy about that.
I don't know if my power bill will. So. And then lastly, we have either Colin University in Australia. They are now working with a zinc air battery, and they're trying to eliminate the use of lithium-ion batteries. And they're getting some pretty good results out of this. So just put it on your radar that that what they're doing is it's basically a negative electrode, and it's a zinc and a positive that is made to the air. So it's basically that transfer of electrons that way. And these have been around for a while, but now that they're able to get it into a small enough package that it can work for this. Now, the applications would be, again, cheaper batteries because you're not using those very expensive heavy metals and these exotic metals for your battery. They're in the past, there's been a short lifespan of them. So that extension of that lifespan, I think, is the key. So again, everybody now is really pushing, where can we go with this? And I don't think that's ever been the case. You've had pockets of people who have worked in battery technologies. But even at that, I was reading yesterday that the one from Toyota have moved up. So instead of it being 2028, we're now looking at 2025. For some of these 800-mile range, 10-minute charge systems. So, again, show me,
Yeah.
prove it.
The system I'm the most excited about around the hype around it has been the solid state.
I think
with
solid state's
Toyota. I
gonna be
mean,
the
that
way to
seems
go.
like a really solid option, but I think like we were discussing recently, I think it was with Chris as well. We're at the big, thick TV stage of the industry, and that was revolutionary for the time. But look what 15 years did to TVs.
Yeah, I saw in Sam's the other day an 85-inch, and it was like $1,350 for an 85-inch.
Yeah.
Everything you could want, and I'm like, God.
I think that we are 10 years away from some massive things in the battery space that we never thought we could do. And as EVs have become more widely adopted, more than they ever have in the past, I think we're now at the juncture where we're going to see a significant improvement on research. A lot of people are going to be looking at that and studying it. I mean, it's already happening, but that technology will begin to actually be implemented within the next 5 years. And I think 10 years from now, we'll see a drastically different game than what we're currently talking about in the space. I think 300-mile range will come and go, and we'll see an improvement in that in the near future.
All right. That was the news for this week. Now let's switch gears real quick before we get into our guest today and talk about the GMC Sierra. So this has already been announced, so this is kind of a recap of where GMC is, and of course that's under the blanket of General Motors, which also I'm sure a lot of the design is going to come from the Chevy EV, the Silverado design as well. They look very similar. I see some design cues if you look at the picture here of the Hummer EV. You can kind of see on the backside. There's several things about this truck. Now, I also have one of these that I've put the deposit down on. I'm kind of lukewarm on it now, just from a standpoint that I really like my F-150 Lightning, and I don't really see a reason to really go to another one yet. So, but on this one, when you look at it, obviously, I like the look of GMC's better than the Silverados. Always have, just a personal preference thing. I've always felt GMC is better built, but I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I like the look of the Silverado truck, like the gas powered truck, but then their EV one, I mean, it was all right. I like the look of the newer Silverados, but the EV one kind of went a totally different direction, which is its own thing, which a lot of car companies went down that vein and created a totally new look. But for me, if I'm looking at the EV version, I definitely think the GMC kind of has a sharper look. The Ram looks really good.
I like the Ram too.
It looks real sharp.
You got two different Rams. You got the Ram that they're kind of showing that they're going to build. Then you had the concept Ram that looked extremely good and was very different. And I'm like, wow, that's different. You could do maybe third row seat in it. And then they show what they're making. And I'm like, it's kind of like a Wish.com version of the one I wanted. So
hey, it has good range and power. And
I will say that the interior, I got to sit in a friend's TRX, and the interior, the leather, the way that the interior wrapped around you was so good. I mean, the interior space on that one, you could definitely tell was different than U.S. made trucks. And I think that might be how Fiat come in and said, hey, here's how we do it. Here's the
actual release of the Ram, which this is not even the vehicle we're talking about. The actual release of the Ram, the inside looks really nice.
Yeah, so I mean, they're definitely up in their game in this, but they do have a long way to go because, again, that's where I like our Fords is they were the first. They decided to make that investment and for I would have never bought a brand new vehicle because I've always been told wait 2 or 3 years and then get it because they got the bugs out of it. But so far, for at least my experience, it's been really good. But the Denali, $100,000 starting out for that.
Tows less than the F-150.
It does tow less, not much, 500 pounds. So it does have a lot less payload, which is surprising.
500 pounds matter.
Well, 500 pounds that, but you're looking at 1,300 pounds for the bed, and
Ford's is
23 or 2235. Yeah. That's a pretty good amount. Now, is anybody that buys these things really going to use them as a work truck? Probably not. I mean, I have mine. I've already got dents all over the bed and everything because I do it because it's just a work truck for me. But so that's really probably not going to be that big a deal. I think some of it is the weight. This truck also has the crab walk to it. That's a lot of extra parts in there that go into making that system. And when you add that into it, that's just more weight you can't use to haul with, or you can't use to put in the bed. So I think some of the design and the crab walk is cool, but would I ever use it? It's not like the frunk where I'm going to make it go up and down when I get groceries just so I can use it. No, I don't do that. I use it because that's where I put all my junk at. There's good things about it too, because it's kind of hard to break into it. So if you want to put bag of cash or something in it, there's a less chance of it getting grabbed. So we won't get into the details on that one. But
what do you do with your
front?
What
do you do with your front? I'll throw bags of cash in it. So, power, very good power, 754 horsepower, 785 foot-pounds of torque, some more than the F-150.
Very similar.
Yeah.
I think relatively it probably will slightly underperform it just because it's heavier.
Yeah. 400-mile range, though. Mm-hmm. That's really good. So it's
what's the battery size? 180, 200?
I didn't get that. I'm guessing it's the 180 battery. It'd probably be a good thing to look up there. The actual size of the battery, I don't know. But 400-mile range, that's going to be similar to that of the a little bit less than what the Cadillac was. What was the Cadillac's? You remember? It was like 450, I think.
The range was 450 on the Escalade IQ, yeah.
But it was 180 for its battery. 200, I think, is the Hummer, and I could be wrong on all these, so don't quote me. So I would say the battery would be the same design architecture that's in the others.
It says the 2024 GMC Sierra EV battery size will be 200 kilowatts.
200 kilowatts, so bigger than that of the Hummer. Well, that makes sense then, because if it's the same Hummer one, the Hummer only gets like 350 out of it. So this would be lighter than it is because of the size. I don't know if it has aluminum for its panels. I don't think Chevy has done that yet. So you have that extra couple 100 pounds that you're hauling around that's just for the body. So, it is their choice, or it is their jump into that market, and it looks good. It performs not as good as some, but in the area that I like, which is range, I like the 400 better. I'm kind of a range snob. I would rather have more range than buttons and goodies. I'd rather have everything else plain Jane and have more range. But
yeah. The question is, I think from what I've heard, they're only dropping their Denali first. Yeah. And then they'll drop the lower price models.
Yeah, so you're spending that $100K right off the bat. You're not going to get a break in it. And there's going to be a lot of them sold, and that 400-mile range helps. I would say real world would be 350, 340, knowing what I know.
I just think that the wisdom for these manufacturers is to find a way to make a vehicle like Ford did, but to make a vehicle that can fall under the federal tax requirements, because one of my largest attractions to buying my truck was the fact that I got $8,000, in tax credits.
$7,500 back, yeah.
Yeah, that's a gigantic thing, and those incentives are still available. But with the Affordable Care Act, it limited the MSRP to $80,000.
Yep.
And you're seeing all these manufacturers announce these $90,000, $100,000, $120,000 vehicles, and yes, there's a market for that.
They're going to sell out. It ain't going to matter.
Yeah, but there's more people out there that are looking to buy something that's sub $80,000 than that's looking to buy north of $80,000.
And when you add all these things into it with the crab walk and all these extra parts and pieces, my guess is it's going to be very hard to get that price down there.
The Lightning Pro has been sold out ever since it's released because it's gigantically desirable. And it's the $50,000 version, but the XLT gigantically. But it's one of those things that the XLT has been very popular because it's the price. And I think that if you can
if I could have bought the XL base version at
Pro
$39,000 with the extended battery, which would have put it at $49,000 with no bells and whistles, but had the 325-mile range or 330 with no other bells and whistles on it, I would have grabbed that in a heartbeat. So you got $49,000.
I think if you had every dealer, every OEM looking at a $50,000, 350 to 400-mile range base truck.
Oh, it'd sell out. That's why you don't want that, because you want to make that cash.
Yeah, the margins are going to be better when you can add a $500 speaker system and sell the vehicle for $10,000.
Well, and it doesn't help the fact that interest rates are so darn high right now that you're going to be spending on that vehicle $300 extra today or more to have that payment versus when it was at 3%. So.
I just think that I think that if the car manufacturers want to encourage adoption, they need to drop more options that fall between 50 and 70. I mean, you can go all the way up to 80, but make sure that the MSRP lands at 79,999.
Even at the price that Ford has right now, they lost $4 billion last year.
But I mean, that's heavily tied around to their infrastructure investments.
Yeah, but you still have to recoup all of that over time. I think it's a hard game for them right now because me and you both can look at an F-150 regular and then any EV, no matter what it is. You're not going to make that EV cheaper than a truck that you've built for 25 years, no matter what car company you are. The traditional truck's going to be cheaper. You already got everything in place. You're not buying your batteries from somewhere else and having to get heavy metals and all these other things. And so I think the hard part is doing what Tesla has done, which is what Ford, I think, is copying. Or not copying, they're doing their own way forward, which the announcement of we're going to have less moving parts, we're going to have less pieces and parts to build that particular truck, less time taken to put the truck together. And that's what Tesla has done. When you look at their huge rear subframe that they've designed for their vehicles, it's poured out of aluminum under one pour. It's extremely hard to do that. And they have spent wads of cash to get this technology that would allow that to have one subframe that once it's done, you have no more welding, there it is, you're done. And that speeds up production. That lowers that cost for that one piece. Just say that one piece represents 1/3 of the price of your vehicle and you lower it by 20%. That's a huge savings. And I think that mindset is kind of where Ford is looking at, and it's going to trickle down to everybody. Everybody's going to see it, and they're going to say, how can we? That's why everybody's building battery factories right now. That's why Tennessee has General Motors and some of these others here, and Tennessee has Ford that's coming in with theirs, and Volkswagen is because, well, now they're making their own batteries. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they did not think that was going to be the direction that they needed to go until Tesla's like, hey, hold my beer, watch what I can do.
Yeah.
And now that they've shown that it is not only profitable, but also here's the cost of ownership afterwards. That cost of ownership is great, especially for us. I'm at 30 or 26,000 miles or so. When you do the calculations, it is $3,400 I've saved in gas cost. And that's directly against the cost of a truck that if I bought a Raptor would be a same price truck, but I'd have had additional monies even higher than that for gas. Because I think they only got like 15 miles a gallon. So, when you do an apples to apples comparison to, say, a Raptor, I'm quicker, I'm cheaper, and have less moving parts. And I've had probably as many or less problems than I would have had if I had one of those. So,
and your maintenance costs are nothing because there's no oil changes.
Yeah, I don't
tire rotations. All you got to do.
Yes, which is something that you definitely have to do. So anyway, GMC, great truck. I think it's going to be a great truck. I've owned several GMCs as work trucks growing up, doing our grading and demolition. So kind of interested to see what happens with it. And good luck with that new vehicle. Don't say when it's coming out. I think it said 2024, so late next year.
I'm sure the orders will open up soon, and then
because I've already got mine in as soon as it came up. We'll see what happens with it, and that's probably one of the few I'm just going to say goodbye to and not.
You'll drive a Cybertruck and a GMC.
I don't know.
And a Lightning. I'll drive the Ram. The Cadillac.
I'd say I don't know if the Cybertruck is going to be kept or not. I'm still on the fence on it. If it's a 350-mile range, I'm probably not going to keep it.
Yeah, I wish they would let you defer until the 500 came out. But
yeah, so that's and again, it might. I don't know. My gut feeling is that. And I just got an email just as we're talking. This Ford Motor Company has adjusted their charging prices through Electrify America. So that's something we'll research, talk about later. So
there you
go. Something new always coming up in something like that. So, but that is all of our news and car manufacturing spotlight for today. And we have a guest coming up next.
We'll take a break.
Be right back.
All right, we're back. We have Nick on the phone from New Hampshire. Are you there, Nick?
Yes, I am. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. You drive a Mustang Mach-E, is that correct?
I do. It's a 2022 premium extended range currently.
How do you like that vehicle?
I really enjoy it. It drives well. It's quiet. It checks all the boxes for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, what were you driving before you kind of entered the EV space?
So before getting into the EV space, I was just driving a Jeep Cherokee. It was like a 2014 or something along those lines. It was getting up there in age. It had about 125,000 miles on it, and I was looking to upgrade, and it just seemed to make sense to go electric at this point.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Ford announced the Mach-E, and I think a lot of traditionalists, when it comes to Mustangs, were scratching their head like, is that a Mustang? But I've gotten to ride in one, and it was the first really EV experience that you got to have within Ford, and it's more powerful and faster than most Mustangs. I mean, all Mustangs except for obviously the ones that are souped up. As far as the sportier one goes, you have a premium. What's the 0 to 60 on that? Do you know?
If I remember, that's in like the low 4s, like 4.5, 4.8, something like that.
And it's the GT one that goes like 3.5.
Yeah, with the GT with the performance package, gets you into that mid 3s range because they got the bigger motor up front, and the performance package comes with the summer tires.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I don't think that that's the end all be all, but I mean, both Jessie and I drive F-150 Lightnings, and getting into the space, I came from just a traditional F-150, and the first time I got to put the pedal to the floor, it was life-changing.
Yeah, I've even been around vehicles like that, but I mean, even at that, I've sat in some very fast vehicles, and that truck actually beat most of the stuff I've ever used or raced.
It's just a totally different experience. I have a buddy that has a Supra, and he has it souped up, and it can go 0 to 60 in like 3.8. So it's like a hair faster than my truck, but that thing whines and screams to get there. And for my truck, it's just absolute silence, 0 to 60, and that's just a experience. So smooth, so effortless, and just so much torque off the line. It's insane.
If you're looking for just straight line speed and you want to be the fastest person in the world, I would say a lot of these EVs aren't really going to win you that quarter mile, right? But it's that initial launch that, especially this being my first EV, that initial launch where it kicks you back in your seat. That's not anything I was experiencing in a V6 Cherokee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the ability for electric to provide that higher level torque. It's on the bucket list. We've talked about this a couple of times, but it's on the bucket list to get in the Lucid Air Sapphire, because that 0 to 60 is 1.8.
Or lower. It might even be lower than that, but yeah. So it's now, and then I think to your point too, on the upper side of the quarter mile is kind of difficult because on a closed track, my truck only goes up to 107 miles an hour and it stops. That don't matter where you're at. If you're going on a closed course, is where we did it at. So we were, protected.
It was definitely a closed course for sure.
So it was, but 107 and you stop, and it has the ability to go higher than that, but that's kind of where it's limited because they kind of understand, hey, you don't need to be going 200 mile an hour anywhere in this vehicle. Have you seen what the max speed on a closed course safely is for a Mustang?
Yes, I have. I did take my Mustang to the quarter mile track here in New Hampshire, and if I remember correctly, it's like 108 or something in that range. I forget the exact. Yeah, I forget what the exact number is. But it climbs up to power, and it just really just hits a plateau where it's not really pulling you any further, any faster.
Yeah. If you're going 50 miles an hour and somebody pulls up next to you and you try to launch from there, the power delivered isn't going to give you a kick back in the seat the same way it is when you're in that low mileage, because the power delivered at that instant, the instant torque that you get when you're 0 or 5 or 10 miles an hour launching up to 60, you get that high level torque, but then obviously, it limits itself once you go high.
And that area,
or if you do that fake launch control where you kind of hold the brake and the accelerator and kind of brake drop or neutral drop, you get a real kick.
Oh, I've not done that yet.
I've not done that yet.
Huh. I wonder if
give it a try. It.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah.
You gotta get the power built up in the motor, and then just let go of the brake or drop it from neutral to drive. It'll give you a good old kick.
We'll wind the turbo up first.
We'll leave here and go back to that closed track. And,
that closed track and try it out. So, well, and then also when you're starting to talk about like drag racing and everything, you're from an area that just north of Boston. Obviously, you have New Hampshire Speedway, and then you have Dover. You know, one of my favorite tracks up there in Dover, Delaware. We're right near the southern part of Delaware, but at the same time, when you start looking at the road system that you have around, which is 89, and I think 93 goes from Boston north. Is there a lot of charging networks and everything along that? Because I mean, you don't have those two interstates that run through. So that's a big issue that we have here in the Northeast. Really, anything north of the major metropolitan, which is Boston, it really starts to fall off. So I'm in the southern part of New Hampshire. Anything from me north is really just a charging wasteland. At best, you're finding some 50 kilowatts, but it would be a challenge even for me where I am in the winter to use my Mach-E to go to one of the ski resorts, say Wildcat in the winter or something, make it up there and come back. Well, and I think that's what this NEVI program that the federal government is doing. And I believe that, who were we talking to? We were talking to Vermont.
Yeah, it was Vermont, yeah.
And obviously New York, about some charging infrastructure. And I know that's going to happen. So within 50 miles, I would also assume that when you start looking at places that's, has harsh winters, that there needs to be a little bit more investment into I would say, underground heating to just basically melt the snow off of these stations. And then that's where cover would definitely have to kind of happen, because you don't want to have to wait for somebody to push 2 foot of snow out of the way so you can charge. The
malls and Walmarts around here that do have charging in the winter, you'll see that when they plow the parking lot, they seem to pile it near the chargers too. So
that's the gas-powered plower, basically giving the glorious middle finger to the charging station.
Yeah, so you near
really actually icing it, right?
Yeah, are you near Manchester? I think Manchester and Salem is the only places I've been up that way. Is that kind of where you're from, or near that area?
Yeah, so I'm more towards the east. So I'm like between Manchester and Portsmouth.
Oh, okay. So you're Seabrook area.
Exactly, and there's one not too far from the nuclear plant, but there's a charging station that way.
So you wanted to get out of Boston, but you still wanted to be able to drive there during the day if you wanted to. So
yeah, I can go anywhere south. I just I gotta take the wife's car if I want to go north.
So here's an interesting question with you being from the north. How long ago did you buy? I mean, you've owned the Mach-E. I think you said you had a standard range and now an extended range. When did you buy your first one?
I bought the first one in July of 21.
Okay.
It was one of the early builds. It was like they were called the Job Ones at the time.
So you've experienced a couple winter cycles. What is the estimated range of your vehicle, and what have you seen it go down to on the bitter cold days?
Yeah, so in the standard range, when I had that one, the EPA rating on that was like 220 or something. I forget the number. They did boost it up a little bit. But I would see anywhere from like 140 to 180 on the gasometer in the bitter cold.
So you're losing 30% almost in that. And what was the temperatures when you saw that?
That would be real cold. Don't really want to leave my house cold.
Yeah.
But anything under, let's call it freezing, right? So in the 30s and below, as you're in the higher 30s, mid 30s, maybe I'm getting that 180. But as I get closer to zero, I'm getting closer to that 140.
Yeah, see, we don't have zero here that
and
often.
that percentage drop is the same in my extended range, so it's about the same difference. So in the summer, I could see almost 300 on the guessometer, whereas in winter, I'm going to see low twos.
Gotcha. Okay. So you are seeing a reduction. I mean, that's something very viable for people considering the EV space to consider. If you live in a bitterly cold area, the marketed range isn't always what it seems. Now, did you use preconditioning and some of the other tools? Do you park in a garage, or is it left in the cold, and that's why? And then when you're starting it in the cold.
So I do park outside in my driveway, so it is exposed to the elements. In the winter, I tend to leave it plugged in more often than I do in the summer. And then if I work from home, but if I do have a planned, got to go somewhere the next day, I will set a precondition.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure all that it does for the battery, but I was curious if that helped at all. I noticed with my truck, I park outside now, but I did park in the garage over the winter, and I was noticing the days, I mean, we don't have as cold as you're seeing there, but the colder days, I saw a little bit less range loss if I started obviously in the garage warm and then did preconditioning and then left. That range tended to be better because the battery was already warm and kind of stayed warm with use, rather than be from basically frozen, trying to get back going again. But it's an interesting play. I mean, I think if you live in the north or anywhere north of basically the middle of Tennessee, you have to consider the cold. And how that plays in with your range, because around town you still aren't going to be affected by a 150-mile range on a 200-mile range car. But at the same time, that's something that if you intend to do a lot of road trips in the freezing cold, range does play a factor on the batteries when it's that cold.
Yeah, definitely. And, it really comes down to people's personal daily use. The standard range that I had before this extended range, for my use, even in the winter in its worst case, I always had enough range to do the things that I need to do in a day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I'm a real estate agent primarily, in what I've been doing, and so I mean, around town on the busiest days, I'm driving maybe 80 to 100 miles, and so I mean, my truck, EPA is 320. So even on the cold days when it was saying 260, 270, as long as I'm charged up, then I'm not going to see any sort of range anxiety in that day. There was only once or twice over the winter that I had to take it on a longer stretch, and once it got warmed up, then it really didn't wasn't as affected as it would have been otherwise.
Yep.
Still a consideration, but that's something that if you plan around it, it's not the end of the world. But if you leave it out in the elements, obviously the range will drop. But the EV,
it's a different mindset, right? It's once you've gone to EV, you've got to do you got to think about it a little bit more and do a little bit more planning, but it's not really that much of a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And I think once the charging infrastructure really builds out over the next 2 years with the federal funding that's pushing out to all these states right now, we're going to see a lot more ease and less need for planning. I've brought this up probably 3 times on the podcast, but I took a trip to Florida, and when charging stations are every 120 miles apart, it takes a lot of strategic planning. But when you have charging stations every 50 miles, you can be a little bit more.
There'll be 30 charging stations once this is all built out from here to Florida. So
yeah, then in that regard, you can be driving and then be like, okay, I'm starting to get low. Where's the next charger? Rather than that before I leave, I'm having to say, okay, where am I going to make it to? Is there a restaurant nearby that I can go to? Like, it's a lot more strategic planning.
That's stressful. It's stressful, but that's probably why you went from regular battery to extended ranges for that same reason, to get that extra bit of mileage. That way you didn't have to worry about it as much. So now,
it was more the conditions of the market actually made upgrading kind of beneficial to me. And there's a few niceties that the premium has over the select that are are nice to have. So it was more of a market situation why I upgraded.
Yeah, that's perfect timing too. You probably could get a maximum out of yours and basically upgrade for free. So
that was essentially how it worked out. I could get rid of the Select at close to what I paid for it. Tax credits were available. It was essentially a free upgrade.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Tax credit.
Well, last part of this, before we go, what is your next vehicle that you're wanting to go with? Is it, or do you have any?
If you had a dream vehicle,
the next one you want
primarily in the EV space, if you could get anything, what would you get?
So there's two that are the ones that I would always go for. One that I actually have one on order, considering going through when it becomes available, is the Rivian R1S.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of that vehicle.
Nice, yeah.
I'm just one. Yeah, and then the other side, as much as I'm not a huge Volkswagen Group fan, the Porsche Taycan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we've seen some around here. I've not really talked to anybody that had a Taycan.
No, I've seen a couple, but I haven't actually talked to a driver. We saw the other day when we were. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's low on range, but it does have the faster charging infrastructure built in, as long as EA can supply that much.
As long as the station works.
Yeah,
exactly.
We last week were in Nashville and we stopped at a charging stop and saw a BMW, and it was the first time I had spoken to one of those drivers. But that was a really sharp.
And a Mercedes.
Yeah,
right beside it was a Mercedes.
The BMW and the Mercedes were super sharp.
Had a big kidney bean nose on it, though. I'm not a big fan of that, but yeah. So
those SUV or the coupe?
SUV. Both were. Yeah, kind of smaller than I thought they'd be, but again, I think it was shocking for us to see two of those right next to each other, right? And it was a very large EA station. I mean, I think there were 8 chargers there. So, and it looked like most of them were working. I think 2 weren't working.
I mean, it was pretty much the only supercharger station in Nashville. So it's going to get a lot of love for people coming through with it being such a busy area.
Yeah. So, well, those are 2 good choices too, though.
Station.
The what?
I had used the Tesla station in New York that has the Magic Dock on a road trip that I was doing for work. I was driving from New Hampshire to Philadelphia, and I stopped at that Brewster Magic Dock on the way down. And besides me, there were 2 of those BMW iXs, the SUV, charging at the station as well.
Yeah, those Magic Docks are something else. I think that we're going to see a lot more of those come up in the next few months.
It's a smart play. Yep. I mean, with the infrastructure that we're building in Tennessee, we're looking at having the NACS ability on those. But I think Tesla opening up and putting the CCS Magic Dock, opportunity on, it's just smart, because then you can double the quantity of drivers that can use your station and keep that occupancy at a higher level.
Yeah.
And just adding that Tesla NACS handle to an EA station doesn't really solve the fact that their systems are usually a mess.
Yeah. Which is why I've not seen any of them be awarded any of these funds for new stations so far in the last, 3 or 4 states that have issued their awards for the charging systems. I don't think EA has received any.
Yeah.
I also don't know if they've even applied for it. So they may have not applied.
And I mean, I think it's infrastructure and reliability. And I mean, with our infrastructure that we're building, I mean, we're looking at some high quality charging units and things. That way you'll have better uptime and performance abilities. That way you're getting,
Yeah, still got to defend them though. They were the first. They've put a lot of infrastructure out there. It was the brand new way to go. Obviously they were treated rough because you are the first and the only ones to use. So I think it's been kind of a hard thing to do.
And not out of passion. That's the issue that I have with EA. It was built out of punishment, not passion.
Yep. And I don't think they spent the most they could have on the systems that were the best opportunities. When you look at some of the technology they used, it was kind of the bottom of the spectrum when it comes to
they were going for cheap. But now I think now they're working on trying to improve, but they're just so far behind that it's a big
It's a big ask.
adjustment.
You know, and this kind of goes into what our stations.
I will give them credit. They are getting better. I've been to stations and they have.
Yeah, we've been a couple.
But I think instead of buying some units through other manufacturers, I think they're actually manufacturing some of their own units now with the size of their company.
Multi-billion-dollar company. So,
but that's something that I still think that there's a long way to go, and I think that there's some shortcuts that can be bypassed. But I think adoption of EVs and use at the stations. I mean, I was reading an article that was saying that the highest that Electrify America can expect on a station is 15% occupancy. If you see 25%, your profits go up enough to where you can justify infrastructure expansion. But it's hard to keep a site profitable with demand charges and, you know, electrical infrastructure and upkeep and other things.
Demand charges killing them.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that if you don't have a good profit margin on these stations, then that really does affect your ability to install quality units. Obviously, there's not been federal funding up until this point.
Now.
You know,
So
for on a large scale at least to do these projects, and so with that being available now, it's going to create more competition, which will force them to improve if they want to survive. But
EVgo won 20 of the locations with pilot gas stations up in Ohio, so that's going to be a huge, competitor. If you are Electrify America in Ohio, now you have somebody that probably has as many, if not more, stations. So competition, but
EVgo.
And competition, I mean, if they don't work, people aren't going to stop there. Yeah. If they're too expensive, people aren't going to stop there.
It's a hard business model as well, right?
Oh yeah.
If you're opening a gas station, everyone needs to gas up their car. A charging station is really just intended to extend your journey. It's not your main source of fuel, or at least in my opinion, it shouldn't be your main source of fuel.
Yeah, and if you have multiple choices, now what is going to be the attraction? Is it going to be to be able to stop and do something for that 30 minutes while you're waiting? Is it going to be something, well, this place gives me 10 cents less per kWh than everybody else, so I'm going to stop there because it's cheaper? There's going to be a lot of questions, and this is an industry that's never had that happen. You can have...
I think it'll go the subscription model route where you kind of like cell phones in the beginning where you purchased an amount of minutes for your phones back in the day, right? I think
that would be a good one. The
subscription model will probably be the way that it ends up, is how I see it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to talk about down that vein, but something that, obviously we're hoping to see improvements, but it's been great to kind of hear from you. Hopefully we can touch base again at some point and have you back on to talk more about your experiences and things.
And your Rivian.
Once you get it.
Yep. Yeah, I'll keep you guys posted when and if that gets delivered.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. We'll keep in touch.
Yep. Well, this
awesome.
is
Thank you, guys.
Another episode. Turned down for what?
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.